Mr. President, I impose a call of the Senate.
The Senate is under call. Senator Bolden.
Mr. President, I move that further proceedings under the roll call be dispensed with and the Sergeant-at-Arms be instructed to bring in the absent members.
On that motion, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion prevails. Pursuant to Rule 12.5, Senator Champion moved that the following members be excused for a conference committee on SF 1832 at 5:30 p.m. Senators Champion, Hawj, Mohammed, Verbatim, and Draheim. On that motion, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion prevails. Remaining under motions and resolutions, we go now to the third order of business, messages from the House. The Secretary will read the message.
Mr. President, I have the honor to announce that the House has adopted the recommendation and report of the Conference Committee on House File number 2446 and repassed said bill in accordance with the report of the committee, so adopted. House File number 2446, a bill for an act relating to state government, establishing a budget for the Department of Agriculture. House File number 2446 is herewith transmitted to the Senate. Signed, Patrick Duffy Murphy, Chief Clerk, House of Representatives.
I go now to Senator Putnam for a motion. Senator Putnam.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the foregoing recommendations and Conference Committee report on HF number 2446 be now adopted, and that the bill be repassed as amended by the Conference Committee.
To that motion, Senator Putnam.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Mr. President and members, it's an honor to have another opportunity to talk about agriculture with all of you here today. But Minnesota's agriculture faces two related crises right now. Farmers are facing increased costs, fickle weather, and an unreliable federal government. And we're on the brink of a major recession in Minnesota's ag land. Simultaneously, however, people throughout the state are suffering food insecurity at record-breaking levels. Members, this bill accomplishes balance. We help farmers grow, and we help people have access to nutritious food. Now, the bill that passed this body, as you may recall, had a negative budget. Members in the Senate, we had a responsible approach to budgeting, and our budget was negative $313,000. In Conference Committee, our target was $9 million. That's a little bit better. So the bill changed, but the basic skeleton is the same. The bones are the same, but the meat's a bit different. The most significant changes that passed this body, I'll talk through them briefly right now. First, we maintained our increased funding to the Ag Emergency Account and maintained increased funding for wolf depredation and elk damage. We kept those provisions. We increased funding to the Farm Down Payment Assistance Program. We funded rural mental health and farm safety. We increased funding for farm business management significantly. We provided funding for First District Association to take care of that dairy, its sewer, and all of our Doritos. We also, quite happily, were able to create additional funding for Minnesota's turkey laser program. And perhaps most important to all of us, everyone in this room, we were able to give Tori his reindeer. Last, when it comes to food access, secondly, when it comes to food access, we increased funding for farm to school and early care programs. We increased funding for meat inspection services. We increased funding to meat processing grants. And we dedicated funding to purchasing milk from food banks in Minnesota. Members, we also created a brand new program, an LFPA program, which is a duplicate of a federal program that's gone away that will help people buy food, get farmers get food to people throughout the state. We made a couple quick policy concerns taken care of. First, we created a new cottage foods protocol that will enable folks to grow their businesses and also help the Department of Agriculture help those producers. And members, I heard you last time we were here when we talked about agriculture and you expressed your concerns about fees. So let me tell you a little bit about what we did. We were able to reduce the growth in the grain fees, even though those fees overwhelmingly impacted grain companies with over $100 million worth of business. We still were able to adjust these fees by skimming a little bit off the interest from the Grain Indemnity Fund. We were able to decrease the severe rate increase in these fees and also adopt the Draheim Amendment from before that caps the growth of these fees in the future. But I will also add that the biggest fee increase in our bill was from no one else but Bill Liskfee. Senator Liskfee is the one who created a fee for the cottage foods program, which I'm very glad that he did. But I hope the fact that the only remaining significant fee increase was a Republican initiative perhaps tempers some of our concerns on this area. Members, this bill understands the challenges we all face, how hard it is to grow food, and how hard it is to get it. It's a good bill.
On the motion of Senator Putnam to adopt the conference committee report, all in favor say aye. All opposed say nay. The motion is adopted. The Secretary will give the bill its third reading.
House File Number 2446, a bill for an act relating to state government, establishing a budget for the Department of Agriculture, the Board of Animal Health, the Agricultural Utilization Research Institute, and the Office of Broadband Development.
Third reading. Discussion on the bill. Senator Westrom.
Mr. President, members, I rise to urge your support of this bill. The Ag Bill is kind of the basic bill of feeding the state and feeding the country. There's a lot of mundane things in here, but very important things. I won't go through them. Senator Putnam covered some of those. There's research. There's other food inspections that we take for granted, but all of that goes on behind the scenes or year after year and is what contributes to good genetics, good crop opportunities, and other food sources in our state, value added. There's lots of different things we do for value added to agriculture once the food is grown to turn it into other things. The cottage food provision, which Senator Putnam talked about, would be another reason I would urge you to support this bill. Unfortunately, we were not able to get it implemented this year. Some of the changes that the over 10,000 licensees have been advocating for. Senator Liskey worked very hard on this, along with others in our committee, Senator Kupik. And the House gave us a little bit of a roadblock, but we finally got through that. And some of that's a delay, but it's a good change that will help these small businesses, many of them minority or women-owned businesses, persons with disabilities. It's an opportunity for many of those businesses to get started and get into a side business or sometimes their main business, depending upon what their level of interest is. And so, members, the cottage food, think about that as the jobs bill or a mini jobs bill. The entrepreneurial opportunity this really helps promote. It's amazing how this has grown in the last 22 or 23 years since this started. And so I thank Senator Putnam for helping work with us on this and get this through for so many Minnesotans. That gives them that extra flexibility, the home-based business or the farmer's market that they focus on or other things. And this will allow eventually shipping for that licensee or those that register. It's not a license, it's a registration. And so, members, that's a good part of this bill. The fee increase is not something that we're excited about on the elevators, although capping it and limiting it is a helpful transition for some of those increased costs. And so that's probably the one part that we wish we could have done more on, but capping it and limiting it is a good part. Of course, reindeer, as Senator Putnam talked about, members, this is another issue that certainly many of you wouldn't deal with because none of you have a private zoo in your district across the state, because I represent the only private zoo in the state of Minnesota. Many of the others are public type zoos, great zoos across the state, and I know they all work together very well. But this language works with the Board of Animal Health. We tried to get it through last year. Ultimately, it just helps give the zoo an opportunity to bring in new genetics for reindeer to help continue broadening their genetics or strengthening their genetics or bringing new genetics into their zoos so they can continue to flourish as a family business and entertain so many school kids, so many families, so many young kids across the state and certainly in central Minnesota. It's a great zoo, Hemker Zoo in Freeport. If you haven't been there, as you're driving by on I-94 sometime, take the family, stop in and check it out. It's just a real gem in the center of Minnesota. Senator Putnam and I were able to join up and meet there last year for one of their summer celebrations, had a great time. And Senator Putnam, I'm glad we were able to get that in this year's bill. And members, I urge your support. Certainly there's always things you could look at that could have been better, but this is a very straightforward funding for the priorities in agriculture, and I plan to support the bill.
Senator Dames.
Well, thank you, Mr. President and members, and I do stand and rise to support of the bill, and I'd want to thank Senator Putnam for putting this bill together. I think it turned out to be a pretty good bill. There are a few issues in it that I still do have some concerns about, but that's going to happen when you get a bill like this. But some of our license fees have went up pretty tough in the state of Minnesota, and some of those could impact some of the expansions that people are thinking about in the state of Minnesota, especially in the food license handling and area. But the other one is in the grain elevators. Those fees did go up quite a bit, but I understand that in conference committee, some of that was moderated, so that's good. But there are a lot of good things in this bill. Certainly for young farmers, there's some good pieces in the bill. There's some good pieces in this bill for the future issues we might have with the flu, avian flu, and things like that. So that's good to see that in the bill, and good to see some stuff for the university and some of the research and stuff that they do. There's also stuff in the bill for different leaderships and things like that. So we do appreciate this. And again, thank you, Senator Putnam, for putting this together. And I'd urge a green vote.
Senator Green.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just was looking through the spreadsheet, and unfortunately, I don't have the bill in front of me. I wish that I did. But would Senator Putnam yield for a question?
Senator Putnam will yield. Senator Green.
Thank you, Mr. President. And Senator Putnam, I'm just looking at the bill, and one of the issues in my area would be wolf and elk depredation. And I see that there is money in here for compensation for wolf and elk, and actually in a couple places, but there's also some decreases that I see in here for crop damage and producer grants. Can you tell me on the whole if the depredation accounts went up or down?
Senator Putnam.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Green. The cuts that you see there are not, in fact, cuts, Senator Green. Those are carve-outs. That's just a redistribution of the resource. The money is still there. Now, I'm not sure that entirely answers your question. If I missed something, I'm welcome to try again. You're welcome to try again.
Senator Green.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, Senator Putnam, if you'd yield again.
He will. Senator Green.
Thank you, Mr. President. So I guess basically if they're carve-outs and they're redistributed, were they redistributed back into the compensation? And then on the whole, these accounts, where are they compared to where they were in the previous biennium bill?
Senator Putnam.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Green. They are within the appropriation, and there is an overall increase. And I would add as well that while we have dedicated these resources to wolf and elk depredation specifically, we also do have extra resources within MDA more generally. We've put more resources into their protection services where they can move money around to respond in case there is an incredible spike in one of these areas. So we've also provided MDA with some flexibility. In addition to increasing the resources for both of these issues, as we have done in this bill, we also have increased resources in other spaces that enable MDA to respond should there be a spike in this concern.
Senator Green.
Thank you.
Senator May Quaid.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to thank the committee for their hard work on this, and I want to just call it a small but mighty provision in this bill. One of my passions is food. It's ending hunger and food insecurity in the state of Minnesota, and a lot of that does happen in ag committees, whether it's in the state or the federal government. And the cuts to food programs, to people who support people who are facing food insecurity, to shelves, to food banks, has been really, really concerning. We had $18 million cut through the local food purchasing assistance program. And in this bill, we find a response to that, and we create a state version of that. And I think it's a wonderful response at a time when people are worried about what's going to happen to insert thing you care about or people you care about here that the federal government is targeting. In Minnesota, we can say at this place, we found some money to do that. And I really want to thank Senator Putnam and the conference committee for coming through with that, Representative Fu Lee for bringing that over from the other body. And so I'm really looking forward to voting green for lots of reasons, but that's one.
Senator Port. Senator Port passes. Senator Liskey.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Putnam, thank you for including the cottage foods language in your bill. I want to clarify, though, about the fees that you're discussing and talking about. The fees used to be a dual fee system. It is now a single-tiered system. The $50 fee, which was for the $78,000 annual income, is now a single fee at $30. So it's actually a reduction for those that were already paying the $50 fee. It also changes how their training has to be, and I believe the training is going to be planned out so that hopefully those providers will not have to pay for their training and they will get very good training. And on top of that, they also will be able to ship across the state, which is great because some of the businesses, like a small business in Grand Rapids, the individual is looking forward to being able to sell his products because it's really hard to travel across northern Minnesota and deliver to all of his customers. And so this will make it so he can actually get the freeze-dried foods to his customers without having to travel all the time, which is really good for him and allows him to grow his business. As for the cottage foods bill, the only thing that I was really sad about or disappointed about was that we did push out the date 2 years. So now these guys are going to have to wait for an extra 2 years. And so with that, I would like to point out that my fee, whilst seems to be the largest fee, it probably is not the largest fee in the bill. Thank you.
Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise in favor of this bill. I just want to call out a few of the provisions that are very important to me and my constituents. One has to do with the Biofuels Innovation and Efficiency Pilot Program. And of course, I've noticed a lot of times in the ag community, they do things by incentives. And incentives are the best way often to get great results. And this has to do with reducing nitrogen in the soil. So I'm glad to see that. I'm also glad to see the Olmsted County's groundwater protection and soil health provision. As you know, we live in some very challenging geology, karst geology, and this is very important to my district. And I also appreciate the farm to school and early care grants and the livestock grant program, particularly prevention for the avian flu. I think we need to be very proactive and aware of that. And of course, the Board of Animal Health is always important, particularly mostly at this time. And I just wanted to call those excellent provisions out and thank Senator Putnam and the committee for putting those in. Thank you.
Further discussion on final passage. Final comments from Senator Putnam.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, members, for your comments. I want to take a quick moment to thank all the members of the Ag Committee. We are, I believe, uncommonly dedicated to problem solving, to finding pragmatic, reasonable ways to do the best good we can for the most people. And on that front, I want to take a moment to thank Senator Westrom for being the minority lead and a solid partner as we do this work. And also to thank Senator Liskey for letting me tease him a little bit today. And also for his work with the Cottage Foods project, which he did very, very well. Members, this bill is good and it's important. I'd ask you all to go consult your farmers in your district, but I don't have to do that because I've already talked to them. There's a good chance that if you go visit with your farmers that I've already been there. This bill came from those conversations that I've had, the over 90 farm tours I've conducted in the last 2 years. That's where this bill comes from. This bill was written on Minnesota's farms to help farmers feed all Minnesotans. Farmers, people who need food, they support this work. This is your chance to support it too. Please vote green.
The Secretary will take the roll on final passage of the House file as amended by the Conference Committee. Go now to Senator Bolden for those voting remotely.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Mann votes aye.
Senator Mann votes aye.
Senator Frentz votes aye.
Senator Frentz votes aye.
Senator Murphy votes aye.
Senator Murphy votes aye.
Senator Champion votes aye.
Senator Champion votes aye.
Senator Rest votes aye.
Senator Rest votes aye.
Senator Mohammed votes aye.
Senator Mohammed votes aye.
Senator Hochschild votes aye.
Senator Hauschild votes aye.
Senator Fateh votes aye.
Senator Fateh votes aye.
Senator Marty votes aye.
Senator Marty votes aye.
And Senator Umu Verbatim votes aye.
Senator Umu Verbatim votes aye. Go to Senator Jasinski for those voting under Rule 40. Senator
Thank you,
Jasinski.
Mr. President. Senator Coleman votes aye.
Senator Coleman votes aye.
Senator Housley votes aye.
Senator Housley votes aye. All senators having voted Senator, oh, sorry.
Mr. President.
Senator Jasinski.
Senator Draheim votes aye.
Senator Draheim votes aye. All senators having voted with the desire to vote, the secretary will close the roll. There being 58 aye votes, 8 nay votes, the motion is adopted and the bill passes. Remaining under motions and resolutions, we revert to the third order of business. Messages from the House. The secretary will read the message.
Mr. President, I have the honor to announce that the House has adopted the recommendation and report of the Conference Committee on House File Number 2432 and repassed said bill in accordance with the report of the committee, so adopted. House File Number 2432, a bill for an act relating to state government, providing for judiciary, public safety, corrections, and government data practices policy. House File Number 2432 is herewith transmitted to the Senate. Signed, Patrick Duffy Murphy, Chief Clerk, House of Representatives.
I go now to Senator Latz for a motion.
Mr. President, I move that the foregoing recommendations and conference committee report on House File 2432 be now adopted and that the bill be repassed as amended by the conference committee.
To that motion, Senator Latz.
Mr. President and members, this is the Omnibus Judiciary and Public Safety Policy and Appropriations Bill. We received a judiciary target of $19.163 million for the upcoming biennium with a tails target of $54.882 million over base. We had a separate sub-target for public safety of $88.260 million for the first biennium and a tails target of $57.257 million over base. Members, this bill is a bill that's focused on protecting crime victims and seniors, addressing crime, supporting law enforcement and first responders, and making the often boring but necessary technical changes to state law to improve our judicial and public safety systems and protect consumers. It's a strong balance of reducing recidivism and promoting rehabilitation, harm reduction, and addressing the most heinous of crimes. It addresses public safety from all angles. Some of the highlights of the bill include, within the public safety target after operating increases, only $14 million in funding for meeting the requirements to fully fund the efforts for crime victim services and the Philando Castile Training Fund, and a few additional provisions. For the Philando Castile Training Fund, there's $9.884 million with $1.756 million in the tails. For crime victim services, there's $7.232 million in general fund funding, $1.757 million in the tails, and there's an additional $3.2 million in each biennium estimated for crime victim services through fines and fees. But that funding stream is less certain than the direct appropriation of the general fund money that already exists. There's, among other appropriations, $200,000 for prosecutor training grants, $250,000 for law enforcement use of force training, $14 million from the E991 Special Revenue Fund for critical armor emergency radio system infrastructure. In the budget for the courts, it's pretty slim, members. We funded operating increases at a level that will cover health insurance, and it will cover other lease costs. In terms of compensation, our target was, frankly, it was too slim. Of course, we had to live within it. We gave a 0.9% increase for judicial staff. That's all that we could afford and maxed that out. We left 0% increase for the judges in the first 2 years of the biennium. And that's why I say it is frankly just too slim. We did, however, provide a rate increase for forensic examiners from $136 to $165 an hour, which is still $60 less than these same persons get at DHS, but it's an improvement for the persons that are working to evaluate the mental health status of those in the criminal and civil justice process. And we provided one-time funding for justice partner access digitally to the records of the judicial branch. Policy highlights include an expansion of peace officer death benefits, particularly expanding the definitions of line of death criteria for qualification for those benefits. There's a task force on mandatory minimum sentences. There's a law enforcement agency mandate for tracing, reporting, tracing, and recovered on confiscated firearms, the E-Trace system. It expands the use with important guardrails on the use of mobile tracking devices on fleeing vehicles. This is a slim but effective and carefully targeted judiciary and public safety bill. It's got strong bipartisan participation in the policy bills that are in there. I encourage your support, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Is there discussion on the motion to adopt before we go to third reading? Senator Limmer.
Thank you, Mr. President. In looking over this bill as it's come out of the conference committee, and as we consider adopting the conference report, I would recommend not to adopt the conference report. There are a number of reasons why. I think I'll wait for third reading before we get into the details. But nevertheless, in my opinion, there are significant lapses in resources for police training, for response, not only in our judicial system. Even Senator Latz said that response in this conference committee was slim at best. There's references to requests by law enforcement for adequate funds beyond training, which are no longer in the bill. And there's other things, but I will get into it a little later as we move into the third reading. I would recommend not to accept the conference committee report. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Bolden. Senator Kupek.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would request a roll call.
Roll call requested and granted. Further discussion on the motion to adopt. The Secretary will take the roll. Go to Senator Bolden for those voting under Rule 40.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Mann votes aye.
Senator Mann votes aye.
Senator Frentz votes aye.
Senator Frentz votes aye.
Senator Champion votes aye.
Senator Champion votes aye.
Senator Rest votes aye.
Senator Rest votes aye.
Senator Mohammed votes aye.
Senator Mohammed votes aye.
Senator Hochschild votes aye.
Senator Hochschild votes aye.
Senator Fateh votes aye.
Senator Fateh votes aye.
Senator Marty votes aye.
Senator Marty votes aye.
And Senator Umer Verbatim votes aye.
Senator Umu Verbatim votes aye. Senator Jasinski.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Coleman votes no.
Senator Coleman votes no.
Senator Duckworth votes no.
Senator Duckworth votes no.
Senator Housley votes no.
Senator Housley votes no.
Senator Johnson votes no.
Senator Johnson votes no. Senator Bolden.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator McEwen votes aye.
Senator McEwen votes aye. All senators voting, the Secretary will close the roll. There being 34 aye votes and 33 nay votes, the motion is adopted. The Secretary will give the bill its third reading.
House File Number 2432, a bill for an act relating to state government providing for judiciary, public safety, corrections, and government data practices policy.
Discussion on the bill. Senator Limmer.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, a funny thing happened on the way to and from the conference report. You may recall we had some significant amendments that were adopted with 100% of those voting for specific amendments. The one was to use funding from nonprofit sources and transfer them to the need for police training. You might recall a few years ago, this legislature, in the wake of the 2020 responses to George Floyd's death, that police training had to be improved. And we answered that call. We specifically requested funding to be reserved for specific training that the legislature thought was inadequate or non-existent in law enforcement circles. That amount totaled $6 million per year, and it was recognized universally by both political parties, both caucuses here in the Senate. When it came out of the Senate, we committed $6 million, a transferred fund from certain nonprofit funding sources. This particular conference committee has replaced that with 4.9%. Noble attempt, but only for a short period of time, 26 and 20, or for the next 2 years, and then it drops significantly to $1 million a year. The requirement for that police training is still in effect. And that means everyone's property taxes in the state of Minnesota most likely will go up to cover that expense. A shift, you might say. We also had the request from Sheriff Witt from Hennepin County asking for specific funds for VSET money. You might remember violent crime enforcement teams are specialized law enforcement units comprised of multi-jurisdictions to address violent crime, sex trafficking, and drugs. Sheriff Witt, in a letter that was handed out to everyone on this floor, stated that one person every single day in the county of Hennepin dies from fentanyl. Desperate request for that funds. That is no longer in this bill. There's other items too. You might remember that we asked for and was passed, again, 100% of those voting, for an accountability standard for when we give money to nonprofit organizations. Certain items would be required before the money would get transferred to them. That was found in the A1 amendment back during that discussion. And it simply asks some simple questions: summary of purpose of the grant, the amount of the grant awarded, the amount of previous grants, the amount of other state and federal grants that grantee might be receiving, the number of Minnesotans that might be served. It just was common sense. Matter of fact, Senator Latz at the time thought it was a very good idea. He praised the amendment, saying it would be useful. And I might paraphrase that it would be welcomed. He urged the whole body to accept the amendment. I don't think that's in this bill either. So as we look at this particular bill, we got to understand that these are essential government services. The public safety factor is a constitutional mandate. And yet at the same time, during the conference committee report, it was reported that the executive branch demanded much of the funding to go to executive branch operating adjustments. I don't recall in committee hearings that the executive branch made such a claim during committee discussions. And you know, going back to my public school days and studying American civics, I guess maybe things have changed, but the legislature is the one that makes proposals, they agree upon them, they go through the conference committee process, and then it's given to the executive branch for approval. I don't think we're following that American model anymore, at least in the state of Minnesota. Now, I do have to give credit. There was some protest by conferees saying that they did not even like the way the executive branch had tried to, successfully influence the conference committee. But nevertheless, wouldn't it be nice to get back to that traditional American model of legislating? Now, every governor has an opportunity to tweak a bill that might be coming his direction, maybe give a warning, but to be at the table and demand changes after 4 or 5 months of deliberations in order to create that bill when the executive branch really wasn't part of it? There's something wrong in Minnesota when we start acquiescing to the executive branch. For those of you who follow what your courts do with people that violate the law, and some of the criminal sentencing is minor, Sentencing to serve is a very useful tool for reacting to low-level crime. Oftentimes, people cannot provide the cash fines. Nobody really wants to put someone in jail for a minor violation. So sentence to serve becomes a useful tool. But the money that we have given in the past is no longer there. So some of the counties, especially those that don't have a large tax base, they may not even have a lot of people in some of our more rural areas. They're going to have to figure out a different way how to enforce the law through criminal sanction in a minor category. For those of you who follow the civil side of the law, this bill increases civil filings and motion fees. Now, filing fees, if you want the privilege of being in front of a court, you have to pay a filing fee. Not everyone can afford that. But we decided to move the cost up significantly after we successfully got it down in 2017. Now we're back to the same old routine. There are some good things in the bill as well. I don't want to berate those at the same time. The other policies, I'm going to let others speak about it, but one of the more significant issues that have come to light is the closing of Stillwater Prison. Not a single committee hearing. Didn't see any bill to that effect. Nevertheless, somehow it materialized in the conference committee at the request, I believe, of Commissioner Schnell. I guess it doesn't matter. Commissioner Schnell represents the administration, Governor Walz. But nevertheless, a facility that holds 1,200 inmates and has a staff complement of close to 500 individual employees in a phased downsizing and eventual closure, we'll have to find new plans for where we put inmates. Some people say that the existing prison system will be able to absorb those individuals. No one has quite told me any assurance that the employees will retain their jobs. Kind of some broad statements that I've heard in news clippings is that, well, they'll be absorbed into other prison facilities as well. But, you know, there's only 2 prison facilities relatively close to Stillwater. That would be Lino Lakes and Oak Park Heights. Other prisons that we have are a considerable distance from the Twin Cities area. We have Faribault, Moose Lake, other facilities around the state. That means, by the way, you not only get your job out there, maybe, if there's an opening, but you have to uproot your whole family and move them maybe over 100 miles away. It would have been nice. It would have been nice to have the proper discussion in the committee rather than have this provision of closing Stillwater in a sneaky little way to slip into the bill. No real discussion, no deliberations, no listening to union members that are dependent on their job to feed their families. Oh, but don't worry about it. We've been promised that after the decision has already been made to move in that direction, I guess we're going to have a hearing sometime in September. to probably seal the deal because, quite honestly, they don't require acquiescence or approval from the legislature. We'll just have a hearing on it. So I could go into more detail, but quite honestly, I've just hit some of the points that have really annoyed me. I thought we had a good promise of adequately funding law enforcement training to the point that we would not have to raise property taxes in every single district in the state of Minnesota, that we would have listened to the chief law enforcement officer in Hennepin County, that money for violent crime enforcement teams to combat drugs and sex trafficking and other violent crime, a mere $1.75 million out of a $72 billion budget, and they couldn't quite squeeze that out of the rocks to protect people in Hennepin County, and it also reinforces other law enforcement efforts either. Even the BCA requested this money. They were hoping for this money. And then the meager attention to the judiciary. We've been hearing testimony year after year after year that our judges, who can get paid considerably more in the occupation of being a good attorney, are having a hard time justifying their job as a judge based on the low income, relatively speaking, to other states. It's disappointing on all fronts. So, Mr. President, I'll stop my little grind here, but nevertheless, it's unfortunate that the conference committee did not come back with a better result, and that it picked up a few hangnails here that caught some things that were never in the House bill, never in the Senate bill, and mysteriously they've appeared. While other things that we had a 100% vote in the Senate have simply evaporated in the last few days.
Senator Kroon.
Thank you, Mr. President. First off, a couple of good things that I see in the conference committee report. The statute of limitations for arson went from 5 to 10 years. I think that's an improvement. Mandatory minimums for first-degree criminal sex trafficking were included. I think that's a good provision. And the elimination of the Senate position on the changes to the felony murder statute were taken out. I think that's an improvement. But, Mr. President, there are more concerning things in this conference committee report. Based on the conference committee remarks that I heard, there appears to have been an unprecedented executive interference in the lawmaking process. And I think you can see that in the result of this conference committee report, where most of the new budget target goes to agency operating adjustments. In fact, 73 million of the 86 million went to agency operating adjustments. Now, I'm happy that, I hope that corrections officers are going to get a good share of that money. But other than that, Mr. President, I think with a looming budget deficit, the rest of the agency perhaps needed to tighten their belts along with everyone else. And there's too much money to nonprofits, too much money to the agencies given the meager target here. And certainly the agencies had a seat at the table, maybe more than a seat at the table, and were driving this train here, and they were taken care of. But you know who didn't have a seat at the table is our law enforcement didn't have a seat at the table. They actually got their funding reduced in conference committee, which is kind of mystifying to me. We're talking about law enforcement training that all of the law enforcement community was asking us to not cut. I had my police chief personally reached out to me and told me how important this funding was to the Blaine Police Department. And you probably can say the same thing across agencies across the state. This is critical funding that helps make our police officers do their job better. And they're going to have to either not do it, or they're going to have to look to their own property tax payers to make up the difference. And I just think that given how well the agencies made out here in this process, we could have done better for our law enforcement agents. Also, who didn't have a seat at the table was our courts. In fact, according to the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, she was never even consulted by the governor's office on any of this, which, again, is mystifying, very disappointing. This is a constitutionally mandated branch of government. This isn't just another agency. Our whole system is set up for a strong judiciary branch, strong courts, and it needed to be prioritized as such. Further reductions. We didn't address jury per diems, psychological services, when somebody who's mentally incompetent needs a forensic examination, translators, judge compensation. It may not seem like a big thing to a lot of people, but it's really important to make sure that we have quality judges, to make sure that we have good judges there when we need them to make the whole system work. Competitive compensation. So when you need an order for protection for domestic abuse, there's a judge there to sign that order. When you need a judge in the middle of the night to sign an arrest warrant to go pick up a dangerous criminal, get him off the streets, that they're there to do that. When a single mom needs child support modification, you need a judge there, a competent judge there to do that work. And for the courts to not even be consulted is really an insult. They should have been prioritized and weren't. But even the biggest thing in here, Mr. President, that warrants a no vote in and of itself is the 11th hour backroom deal closing the Stillwater prison. It is a seismic decision in public safety that we're making in this state. And yes, Stillwater prison is old. Nobody denies that. And yes, we need to be looking at replacing it. Nobody denies that either. But what should the process be? Well, there probably should be a bill introduced. There definitely needs to be committee hearings. Definitely need to have stakeholder involvement. We need to talk to our corrections officers and their union. We need to be able to ask questions. I wasn't able to ask a single question on this issue as a member of the Judiciary Committee. Not a single question. It came in the dead of night in a backroom deal, out of the public eye. And you know who else deserved to know about this and participate in the process? The public. If we're going to close the state's second largest prison, the public probably ought to be a part of the process. You don't slip it into a conference committee report after a demand by the governor in a backroom deal. We're talking about 1,200 inmates, 500 staff. There's a good reason why existing law required legislative approval and a deliberate, transparent process to close Stillwater Prison. And we're just crossing that off in a conference committee report. We're undoing that. And we're even making it worse. Pages 24 and 25 of the conference committee report, we're expressly giving the Department of Corrections the authority to close future prisons, and all they need to do is report to the legislature. Other than maybe St. Cloud, which I think is still protected by needing legislative approval, but we can see how important and meaningful that protection was. Closing Stillwater Prison without a replacement plan is irresponsible. The Department of Corrections will be making it up as they go along. Closing this prison without a deliberative plan is dangerous to our corrections officers. It's dangerous to the inmates. And it's dangerous to public safety here in Minnesota. Very well likely will lead to overcrowding in other prisons, which makes those other facilities less safe. The legislature should not abdicate its responsibility and its oversight in this matter. We need legislative approval, legislative oversight, stakeholder involvement, and public feedback. These are the basics of good government. Anything less is dangerous and will put lives at stake. 10 years ago, this would not have even been possible. Our prison population has gone from about 10,800 10 years ago down to around 8,000 right now. And the MRRA, just now starting to be implemented, will bring that number down even further. But we should not be reducing our prison capacity just for the sake of reducing our prison capacity. People aren't going to stop committing crimes just because there's no prison to send them to. And you might think, well, maybe Minnesota has a high incarceration rate, and maybe we should be reducing our prison population. Wrong. Minnesota is already nearly the least incarcerated state in the country. We don't send people to prison here unless it's very, very serious. Once the MRRA is implemented, we'll probably be the least incarcerated state in the entire country. Right now, Minnesota has an incarceration rate of 151 people per 100,000 residents. What's the national average? 355 people per 100,000. Look at our neighboring states. Wisconsin, 311 per 100,000. Iowa, 264 per 100,000. South Dakota, 370 per 100,000. North Dakota, 230 per 100,000. And we're at 151 and going down. Why is our incarceration rate so low? This governor decided not to revoke parole and probation for many different types of violations. That's one reason. Failed UAs, failure to complete a treatment plan, failure to meet with probation officers. Those things used to send you back to prison. They don't anymore. Drug sentencing leniency is a big reason. A big reason is the Hennepin County attorney is not prosecuting crime. Some judges aren't sentencing appropriately. And we can go around with this delusion that crime is down. But is it that, or is it just that people aren't reporting crime? Because why bother? It's not going to get prosecuted. With this closure of Stillwater Prison, we're going to be putting ourselves into a box. We're moving on. We're reducing the prison population capacity in Minnesota, and we're burning the bridge behind us with no plan to replace those beds. We're putting ourselves into a box facing future overcrowding, especially when this state gets around to reversing some of these soft on crime policies. And where are we going to put people? What happens if crime goes up even without policy changes? Where are we going to put people? Nobody's thought this through. That's why we have a deliberative process to go over these things and to get these questions answered and to make sure we're doing this in the right way. And that wasn't done in this case. I think Minnesotans are sick of backroom deals with major policy changes being slipped into conference committee reports. It's bad government. And in this case, it's going to make Minnesota less safe. So for those reasons, Mr. President, I urge a no vote on this conference committee report.
Senator Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, members. I also wanted to speak briefly to the issue of the prison and the prison closure. I want to begin by thanking Senator Latz and the conferees on the work that has happened around this topic all session long. And I have spent time in the Judiciary Committee here, and it is a very, very thorough committee, so much so that sometimes you don't want to go because it's so thorough. But it is right that it is thorough, and we can have confidence in that. I have been to a number of our prisons, including Stillwater Prison, and for those who have been there, it is antiquated, and that is a kind way to say that. It is unsafe. It's unsafe for the people who work there. It's unsafe for the people who are incarcerated there. And so much so that there have been multiple efforts and studies to look at the feasibility of making a closure. And a lot of the work around that question has been done by this administration. And so I think Minnesotans can have confidence in a very phased approach on this issue, and confidence in the reasoning, especially if they recognize that the people who live, who are incarcerated at, and the people who work at the prison are at a high level of danger in work that already comes with a great deal of risk. So I think it's important to acknowledge that. But I also think it is important to acknowledge that the decision came quickly. And there are people who work in our correctional facilities that didn't get a lot of notice. And while I am certain that they know that this has been something discussed by the administration for a long time, it is going to be disruptive. It's phased, it's going to take time, but it will be disruptive. It will be disruptive for the people who are incarcerated within a system that, while we don't necessarily understand it, they do. It will be disruptive for the people who work there, and I think it is important to acknowledge that. I think that the closure is right. Standing between the cells on the third level, recognizing the single pane windows, knowing that there is no air conditioning in the facility, and it sometimes gets to 130 degrees inside in the summer. That's not humane, and it's not safe. So I think the decision is right. But it was executed late in the session, and so for some, not clearly noticed. And that is going to be disruptive for people who work. And I just wanted to acknowledge that as well. I really appreciate the work Senator Latz and you and the conferees have done on this piece of legislation. Thank you.
Senator Gustafson.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you to Senator Latz. Every year I carry bills supporting victims of domestic violence and/or sexual assault, and every year Senator Latz includes at least one of those in his omnibus bill, and so I really appreciate that. And I know that survivors across our state appreciate that as well. The bills are usually bipartisan too, so thank you to my colleagues across the aisle. I'm really thankful that we never really struggled to find support on these bills. Senate File 1055 was included in this omnibus, and specifically the bill prohibits advocates from disclosing certain information shared with them by victims, thereby strengthening privacy rights and encouraging victims to seek support without fear of exposure. A couple years ago, I signed up to be one of these advocates, and I know that it is a really difficult process for these survivors to go through, so it is nice that they have that added protection. And I just want to close by saying 1 in 2 Minnesota women report sexual violence from an intimate partner at some point during their life. 1 in 4 Minnesota women report physical violence from an intimate partner at some point in their life. So every step we take to prevent violence, support survivors, is a good use of our time and our funds. And I thank everybody in this chamber who supported this bill, and especially to Senator Latz. Thank you.
Senator May Quaid.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to talk about 2 pieces. One piece that didn't come back from the conference committee and one piece that did. I want to thank my co-authors on my bill, Senate File 1119, Senators Lucero, Senator Fate, Senator Duckworth, and Senator Wickland. And there's a clone bill of this with other senators on it as well. Right now, on all of our computers, phones, any device that you have, you can download an app that lets you take a picture of somebody or a video and make them naked. Children, adults, family members, seniors, it will do that to anybody. And you can turn it into pornographic material, you can turn it into CSAM. And my bill would have prohibited companies, platforms from allowing people to access that from Minnesota. Because this is very, very, very dangerous and unnecessary technology. And I want to thank the Judiciary Committee for their very, very thorough and thoughtful review of this bill. I want to thank Senator Kroon for making it better and taking any money that we get from suits over this to go to crime victim services, and Senator Umer Verbatim for helping craft that language. It was a really good bill, and I want to thank you, Senator Klein, for hearing it in the Commerce Committee and for the thoughtful discussion there, Senator Friend, Senator Rasmussen. This is a really, really important piece of legislation. I cannot overstate that between now and next session, you will see news stories where adults have done this to children. In fact, after we had the first hearing in Judiciary, 4 days later, a Minnesota school worker was arrested because he was taking pictures of kids at school and turning it into AI-generated porn, CSAM, of these kids. That's going to continue to happen over and over and over again. This needs to pass. It needed to pass this year, and I understand that none of the opposition came from anybody in this room or on this side. We'll work it next year, but I really want to speak to how truly terrifying it is as a person. I'm aware that every time I bring bills about things like this, somebody maybe does this to me. They could do it to any one of us. But I'm more scared as a mom that someone will take a picture of her at the park, right, at the grocery store, and then of course I'll never know. They weren't even alone with her. I wouldn't even see them. And then they could turn her into porn. It's terrifying. It's why I don't put her online, but she doesn't have to be online for it to happen. None of our kids do. So I really want that to come back next year and pass and be signed into law. The thing that did come back, and I don't want to sound like an echo of Senator Limmer or Senator Kroon, but I agree. The legislative branch passes bills. The executive branch can sign them or veto them, right? We pass the laws, they enforce the laws or say no and send it back. But having the executive branch overreach in this way and need their approval to pass our own bills, our own legislation, is wrong. It is an overreach, and it's not going to help us make good policy. And we saw that here, and we've seen it in every other jurisdiction that we have. But it brings me to the closure of the Stillwater prison. I agree that it needed to be closed. It is a very old prison. It is inhumane to keep people who can't leave a building in there in 130-degree heat, right? There have been nonviolent strikes in order to call attention to what is happening there. But as has happened already this year, just to make a decision and poke at the staff, the correctional staff and the unions, and just unleash this so fast is not a good way to do it. Process matters. It might be boring and people might not care about it if they're not directly impacted, but it does matter. It matters. And so I am giving my pledge publicly here, Mr. President, to work with whomever I need to make sure that the phased-in approach of this, at least there is more transparency and that there is stakeholder feedback and an input and engagement. But 500 jobs, that's a lot. And to just wake up one morning and be like, hey, the place you work is going away, imagine how we would all feel. And again, it's old. It's the right decision. Minnesota has actually a very low crime rate. It's 30% lower than the national average. It's lower than all of our neighbors. We are doing good things here in Minnesota to make people commit less crimes. And if we give them the tools and take away the tools, but we are doing that work. So the decision, it's in line with what's happening in Minnesota. But we have to have a better process. Otherwise, people aren't going to be bought in, and it's not going to go well. So I'm really disappointed to just have that be sprung on folks, my constituents included. I want to end by thanking the members of the conference committee for all the hard work. I want to thank Senator Latz for championing the Senate positions. I want to thank him for all of the work that goes into incredibly complex topics with many stakeholders and many folks that do this, and the Vice Chair, Senator Umer Verbatim. This is a good bill. I will be voting for it, but I would be remiss if I didn't bring up what we're going to let continue occur in the state of Minnesota by not bringing in Senate File 1119. And if I didn't bring up just this thing that we're going to see over and over of this overreach, and we're seeing it here, and bad process. Thank you, Mr. President.
Is there further discussion on the conference committee report? Senator Umer Verbatim.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll try to be brief. I really want to thank Senator Latz for all of his hard work along with our fellow conferees. And we heard a lot of great comments from Senator Gustafson and Senator McQuaid about the work to do to protect crime victims. And that's one of my biggest disappointments, is that we weren't able to do more for crime victim services in this bill. There's a large chunk of one-time funding. There's a little bit ongoing. We were really hindered by the demands that came down from the administration on the operating adjustments and to fund this at the same level as other grants in the bill. The difference is that Crime Victim Services has lost federal funding. They are at a crisis right now. There are shelters that are going to close. There are counties that are going to go without advocates. Our crime victims deserve so much better, and we need a long-term funding source. And Senator Latz has a bill to do that I have signed on to, and I would encourage everyone in this body to work with us on that next year, because we have to figure out how to support our crime victims, and we need a long-term solution for that funding. We don't have support at the federal level. It's an absolute shame that we haven't been able to do better for them. Thank you.
Go now to the author for final comments. Senator Latz.
Mr. President, members, as all of you who have been involved in the legislative process know, there's a role to be played in this process. And when we in the judiciary public safety arena are given a target, an agreement as to how much money we have to spend, and we are told in substantial ways how to spend it, our conference committee discretion is substantially reduced. I have made no secret of the fact that I felt our targets were low, and that I was frustrated at being told how much of it needed to go to operating expenses, which is basically all of it, especially in a budget that is almost all operating expenses, health insurance, leases, and compensation, salaries. So we worked within the constraints that we had. I share the frustration of probably everyone in this body about the level of dictation from the executive branch and involvement in the legislative process. And I share the frustration over the process with regard to the Stillwater closure, and I share the frustration with regard to the absence of input from our third and co-equal branch of government, the judiciary. With that said, given what the constraints were for us, I'm very proud of the bill that we have come to the floor with here today. Some of the protests from the other side of the aisle, frankly, ring a bit hollow, because they haven't told us. And by the way, the agreement that came to us and the targets that came to us, although they were not signed on to by our GOP counterpart leadership in the Senate, they were signed on to by our GOP counterpart in the other body, who apparently were willing to make the compromises that are necessary in divided government. So it's very easy to stand up here on the floor and rail against what you didn't get or what you don't like when you don't have the duty to actually govern and make those decisions about what's going to be in the final bill coming to the floor here today. So when Senator Limmer complains about the lack of resources for police training, when to do so, or for VSET, the Violent Crime Enforcement Team, when to do so, raided already appropriated funds from last billing cycle, or last budgeting cycle. And although I supported that doing that, was never going to happen with the other body's support. It's easy to complain about it now. But that was a hard compromise that had to be made to get a bill through. And I will note that even though Senator Limmer got those two amendments on the bill with my support here on the floor, when we had it to send off to conference committee, we still didn't get Senator Limmer's vote on the bill to send it out with his provisions in it. In fact, with many of his provisions in it. And same with Senator Kroon, who has many provisions in this bill, but still didn't vote for it to leave this body and still is advising a vote against it now. So members, let's see what goes up on the board here today. Let's see if Senator Duckworth votes for his bill that's in here to fund the Philando Castile Training Fund, which did get the lion's share of the public safety funding in this bill. Let's see if Senator Howe votes for his provision to extend the sunset on already appropriated funding for line-of-duty death benefits. Let's see if Senator Utke votes for his provision to protect children and vulnerable adults from exposure to fentanyl. Let's see if Senator Anderson and Senator Housley and Senator Howe vote for their provision to more clearly define endangered expansion for purposes of missing and endangered persons program. Let's see if Senator Limmer votes for the bill he co-authored relating to unmanned aerial vehicles use by law enforcement, which we did a lot of work on in conference committee. Let's see if Senator Abler votes for provisions relating to the guardians that he co-authored to make those modifications, make our guardianship system work better.
Point of order, Mr. President.
Senator Westrom, for what reason do you rise?
Mr. President, rise a point of order under our rules of the Senate don't allow members to question somebody's vote on the floor, and I think we're getting dangerously close if we're not already there with Senator Latz's comments.
Senator Latz.
Mr. President, I'm not questioning motives, which is what our rules prohibit. I am questioning final votes, which I think I'm entirely within my province to do. Every one of us lives with the vote we put up on that board. I want to see if Senator Howe votes for his three provisions relating to local units of government authorized to conduct background checks and his redefinition of public officials in cities or counties, or the Hometown Assistance Heroes Program scope clarification. I want to see if Senator Kroon votes for his provision relating to the State Office of Appellate Counsel.
Point of order, Mr. President.
Senator Rasmussen, for what reason do you rise?
Thank you, Mr. President. Point of order, under Masons, we're not supposed to be invoking personalities as a part of the debate, and I'd encourage Senator Latz to talk about his bill and instead of the personalities on the Senate floor.
Members, to my way of thinking, Senator Latz has repeated the votes of members on previous ballot votes and has not induced personalities or motives. Senator Latz.
Mr. President, I'd like to see if Senator Rasmussen votes for his provision, the bill he authored on the crime of damage or theft of telecommunications equipment extending to broadband and cable services that's in this bill. Or Senator Limmer to support his provision that he co-authored with me with regard to the claim amount for mandatory binding arbitration. Or Senator Limmer's provision of real property records, private data classification for our judges, which is in this bill. Or Senator Limmer's bill that he chief authored relating to civil legal aid reporting to the legislature, or his chief authorship relating to change of name requirements for permit to carry holders. Or Senator Pratt on a bill he co-authored relating to retroactive relief for certain felony murders. Or Senator Duckworth for the same bill. Or for Senator Kroon for his provision relating to foreclosure sales. Or Senator Lang for his provision increasing the penalties for assaulting a firefighter, EMS personnel, or other certain health care providers, or Senator Duckworth for co-authoring that same bill that was chief authored by Senator Seeberger, or Senator Pratt relating to his community supervision appropriation, or Senator Utke.
Mr. President, point of order.
Senator Rasmussen.
Thank you,
state your
Mr. President. I rise under a point of order under Mason's Section 110. Under Section 110, it says, it has long been the rule in legislative bodies that no member should refer to another member by name in debate. Senator Latz has been in clear violation in mentioning a number of members.
The point of order is well taken. Senator Latz.
Thank you, Senator from whatever county you represent, for giving me another point of order next time members of your party stand up and call out by name members of our party in floor debate. So let's focus on the provisions. I shared another certain senators' support for the STS program. 20 counties around the state utilize it. The funding from the state has gone from 50% down to 25%, which means it's already the case that counties are picking up 75% of the cost. The Department of Corrections has been providing crew leaders, staff, equipment, in what for many counties has become a dwindling program anyway. In a budget of limited resources, we need to target our resources carefully and in a fiscally responsible manner. And while I think STS is a great program, and I hope that counties will continue it, I don't think we're going to see massive property tax increases to pick up the other 25% of the program if they see the value, especially when they see the value of STS as reducing the cost of actually incarcerating those offenders in local jails. It actually saves money to do STS. With regard to Stillwater, I'm going to leave it to the administration to defend their decision and the process. But I am going to say that this is a 4-year phase-in. So there shouldn't be, it will take time for this to work, and we will exercise our legislative oversight, and I made that quite clear to the Commissioner of Corrections in our last conference committee hearing. And yes, we're going to have our first oversight committee in September, jointly with the House on a bipartisan basis. And we will expect that oversight will continue throughout the process. And members, I don't see that we've got a massive reduction in law enforcement training, as another member of the Senate identified. Training is critically important, and that Philando Castile Fund is pretty well resourced at this time. And we made sure of that in this bill. But I want to talk a little bit more generally about public safety in Minnesota. It has been a bipartisan, decades-long focus in this state on incarcerating the most violent individuals who commit crimes or repeatedly commit crimes that require their incarceration for the public safety, and focusing our resources more heavily on, number one, treating them, rehabilitating them, giving them society survival skills while they are incarcerated, so that when they are released, which 95% of them are at some point, and return to society, they are far more likely to succeed in becoming law-abiding, productive, tax-paying citizens. And Minnesota does a really good job at that, because not only do we pay for the cost of their incarceration, but we pay for sex offender treatment, we pay for chemical dependency treatment, we pay for mental health treatment, we pay for jobs and workforce skills availability when they are incarcerated. We pay for them to get their GEDs or get college degrees while they are incarcerated. And we have a very robust program for once they are released and back into the community for giving them oversight and targeting resources for them to get housing and jobs. And that's the other big piece of it. Once they are out in the community, we have a very strong community corrections partnership with counties and with nonprofits all across the state. The real test of how safe our society is not how many people are incarcerated. It is what is the rate of crime, and when they're released from corrections, what is the rate of recidivism? In Wisconsin, our neighbor, they've got the flip side. They incarcerate about 2/3 of their serious offenders, where we incarcerate about 1/3. Wisconsin pays a much higher proportion of their state budget to warehouse people in their prisons. But the rate of crime in Wisconsin is no better than it is in Minnesota. So for something like 3 or 4 times the cost, they have no better public safety than we have in Minnesota. We're doing it better. We're doing it for less cost. I'm proud of that record. And so should every member of this body be proud of that record, from Republican to Democratic to independent governors going back decades. That has been the approach in Minnesota, and it has worked well. Members here and members of the public, we do it pretty well here in Minnesota. We do it pretty well. And as we increase the incentives in our prisons to access those skills training, the chemical dependency treatment, the other treatments that are available, the compliance with the rules, of following the rules in the prisons, the good behavior, the learning how to be productive citizens. We've created incentives for our incarcerated individuals to learn how to become better citizens. And yes, that will also reduce the prison population. And that will make all of us safer too. This bill, for all of the concerns that we've heard on the floor here today, does a really good job of balancing the resources that we have available, some tougher on crime policies, some right on crime policies, some smart on crime policies, investing in protecting victims and giving them the resources that they need, and yes, targeting our resources in the judiciary as best we could under the circumstances, so that we maintain a robust, independent third branch of government. A vote for this bill is a good vote for public safety and justice in Minnesota. I encourage a green vote.
Those were the closing comments of the author. I go now to Senator Abler at his request to respond to him personally being invoked in the debate. I will return to Senator Latz if he wishes at the close.
Thank you, Mr. President. I apologize to break protocol. I was actually working on conference activities, trying to get the human service bill together, which has been really hard. And I was, heard my name mentioned. I wasn't planning to debate this bill, but I appreciate Senator Latz calling out a portion of the bill that I'm kind of fond of. But I will be brief. Apparently the question is, how could I vote against a bill like this? Mr. President, one single reason and one single reason alone, the Stillwater prison. For some reason this year, in the midst of a world post-COVID, post-people working remote, post-people doing their best to serve, particularly the state employees, members of AFSCME and MAPE, have been, I think, treated relatively poorly by our governor. it may not be aware to you, Mr. President, I wrote a letter to the governor after the last time when he suddenly, as a news conference, a press release, notified these wonderful state employees that they were now suddenly going to come back to work. Seems like a good idea, except some had sold their second car, some didn't have child care. In many offices, including in St. Paul, there's not enough chairs to go around, and people actually have to bring their chairs to the conference room for a conference meeting because those chairs are being used for state employees. And in a similar way, Mr. President, I thought it to be almost unconscionable the way that this Stillwater prison closing was unveiled. How did I know? I read in the paper, 550 employees from AFSCME and MAPE were caught by surprise. And not to worry, you'll get to work 35 miles away or something, and you'll have a job. And these are people who deserve the respect of this body, Mr. President, and deserve the respect to which they are entitled. And if this bill, frankly, Mr. President, if this were the bill for the Human Services bill, I'd be voting no on that. I think that as a body, many people are voting yes for this bill, and I totally support that. But I could not vote for a bill like this, Mr. President, that would treat our state employees so disrespectfully. So thank you, Mr. President.
Any response from the author?
Mr. President, I'm really glad to hear all the support for our unions in Minnesota. I hope that becomes consistent across the board outside of this policy area. And I've already expressed that I share the frustration of the workers, and they know that because from what I have said in conference committee and our judiciary hearings. But the bottom line is, government doesn't exist solely for the purpose of employing Minnesotans. Government exists for the purpose of providing services for the people of Minnesota. For that, we need good, qualified, healthy, and safe workers with good workplace protections and with some predictability. And I support the closing of the Stillwater prison. I regret the process that has come to us in this manner. And we're going to do everything that we can to follow up and make sure that it's done properly from here moving forward. In the end, the bottom line is this prison is inhumane, it's outdated, it needs to be closed in a phased-in process for the safety of those workers as well as the people who are by law under the control of the state of Minnesota.
Secretary will take the roll on final passage of the House file as amended by the Conference Committee. I go to Senator Bolden for those voting under Rule 40.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Mann votes aye.
Senator Mann votes aye.
Senator Frentz votes aye.
Senator Frentz votes aye.
Senator Mohammed votes aye.
Senator Mohammed votes aye.
Senator Hochschild votes aye.
Senator Hochschild votes aye.
Senator Fateh votes aye.
Senator Fateh votes aye.
Senator Marty votes aye.
Senator Marty votes aye.
Senator Herr votes aye.
Senator Herr votes aye.
Senator Port votes aye.
Senator Port votes aye.
Senator Putnam votes aye.
Senator Putnam votes aye.
And Senator Murphy votes aye.
Senator Murphy votes aye.
Mr. President.
Senator Jasinski.
Senator Coleman votes no.
Senator Coleman votes no.
Senator Duckworth votes no.
Senator Duckworth votes no.
Senator Housley votes no.
Senator Housley votes no. Senator Bolden.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator McEwen votes aye.
Senator McEwen votes aye. All senators having voted, the Secretary will close the roll. There being 34 aye votes and 33 nay votes, the bill is passed and its title agreed to as amended by the Conference Committee. I go now to Senator Bolden.
Mr. President, part of parliamentary inquiry.
Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. President. Under Rule 40.2, I'm curious, Senator Bolden recorded a remote vote for Senator Herr while he was sitting right behind her. Can you please tell me how we're supposed to be doing remote voting? Are we allowed to vote for a member remotely who's sitting in the chamber?
We'll make a note in the journal, Senator Pratt, that the vote was performed in person and the remote vote was reported incorrectly.
Mr. President.
Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. President. My point is Senator Herr never voted. Senator Bolden voted in his place, and that's the issue, the essence of my question. Is it proper for a remote vote to be recorded when the member is in the chamber?
Thank you for your patience, members. Senator Pratt, here's what I would say to your inquiry. So I'm going to turn the body's attention to Rule 40.8. And members, once I read this, and I think that you should also read along, we want to make sure that you're functioning consistent with this rule. Rule 40.8 says, when permissible under Rule 40.7, a member may authorize a designee chosen by the respective caucus leaders to vote on the member's behalf while the member is at a location outside of the Senate chambers. If you are in the Senate chambers, even though you may have given someone your vote pursuant to Rule 40.7 and you could have been walking over and then you come in and the person who is designated is giving the report, you still should vote yourself and just let that person know that you are now in the chambers, that you are going to vote. So I need members to pay attention to Rule 40.8. Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. President. And to that point, we have remote voting privileges. We don't have proxy voting privileges. I would argue then that Senator Herr's vote was improperly cast and the vote total was 33 to 33.
Senator Pratt, you don't, we do not have a mechanism for you to designate it that way, and because that's your read of it, we understand your perspective, but it is not authorized under the D rules. So thank you so much, but your point is well taken. That's why I thought it would be important for us to read 40.8. With that being said, Senator Hur?
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the...
Hold on, please. Hold on, please. Okay. Members, I just saw pointing, and I wasn't quite sure why pointing was happening. Here's the intro. Remaining under for the third order of business, messages from the House. The Secretary will read the message.
Mr. President, I have the honor to announce that the House has adopted the recommendation and report of the Conference Committee on House File Number 2563 and repassed said bill in accordance with the report of the committee, so adopted. House File Number 2563, a bill for an act relating to legacy, appropriating money from outdoor heritage, clean water, parks and trails, and arts and cultural heritage funds. House File Number 2563 is herewith transmitted to the Senate. Signed, Patrick Duffy Murphy, Chief Clerk, House of Representatives.
I'll now call on Senator Hur for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the foregoing recommendation and the Conference Committee report on House File Number 2563 be now adopted and the bill be repassed as amended by the Conference Committee.
To that motion, Senator Hur, explain what was done in the Conference Committee.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Conference Committee was agreed upon with the House, and majority of the provision that we left here are included with a little high dollar mark. A few Senate items or quite large major items from that prevail of the Senate provision are wilderness inquiries, Science Museum receive additional $500,000, Lake Superior Zoo, Minnesota African Heritage Museum designation, and Minnesota Children Museum, as well Cultural ID Emergency Grants, Underrepresented Culture Studies material, and Golden Park Celebration, along with Taste Minnesota. The Minnesota Zoo also received an increase as well. So that was compromised with the House, and I'm glad that we had consensus, and now the bill is here with conference. Well, our Conference Committee is here for your support. Thank you.
Any other discussion to the motion? This is just for adoption. We will come right back to you if that's okay. We adopt, and then you'll be able to speak. Is that okay? All right. On that motion, all in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The motion prevails. The Conference Committee report is adopted. The Secretary will give the bill its third reading.
House File Number 2563, a bill for an act relating to legacy, appropriating money from outdoor heritage, clean water, parks and trails, and arts and cultural heritage funds.
Third reading. Now those who wish to speak on third reading, Senator Weissenberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would Senator Pratt yield for a question?
Senator Pratt yield for a question?
Yes.
Senator Pratt, will you yield? He will yield. Senator Weissenberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Pratt, were you on the Conference Committee?
Senator Pratt to the question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yes.
Senator Weissenberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Pratt, how many times did you meet with the Conference Committee?
Senator Pratt to the specific question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Weissenberg, we met once, and that was today to adopt the Conference Committee report.
Senator Weissenberg.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Pratt. So it sounds like you didn't meet in the Conference Committee to go over this, Senator Pratt?
Senator Weissenberg, questions has to come through me, and then for you to ask if he is willing to yield. We do not just keep having direct conversations with members. Senator Pratt, will you yield? He will yield. Senator Pratt to the question.
Thank you, Mr. President and Senator Weissenberg, and I plan to touch on this a little bit in my closing comments, but no, the Conference Committee did not meet to go through the differences in the budget. We did not meet to talk about the amendments that were made. The entire bill was negotiated between the chairs without any input from other conferees.
Senator Weissenberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. No further questions.
Any other discussions? Any other discussions? Senator Green.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I have a few things on the bill. I know that some of them we've gone over before, but some of them were missed. And these bills get passed through, and we've heard before how this passed overwhelmingly when this was voted in 13 years ago, or excuse me, 17 years ago. And it really wasn't that much. It was by 56%, but nevertheless, we have it, and we have it for a few more years. And I've tried numerous times to get changes onto these bills, to try to put protections in the bills as to where this money goes and how it's spent, because the people voted for the Clean Water Legacy Act, and they expect to get some projects in here that would give them clean water. And granted, there might be a few, but if you go through this bill, you will find out that much of this money is spent, some on research, but some is even in here that they would spend the money on telling people about the bill. And I don't think that's what people voted for. I really don't. I'm going to look up here on page 30 of the bill. And I picked 30 just because it was there. Over $2 million for expanding existing state weather station soil temperature network. I don't think that's going to give us clean water. Here's another one, $20 million for statewide assessments of surface water. They're just going to assess the water. There's no project there. And these go to the Pollution Control Agency. Millions upon millions of dollars that are backfilling our agencies to do stuff that they should be doing anyway. And we hear the legacy bill and we hear the things about it that it was supposed to do, and we get a project or two that sounds good, and we never look into the bill. And if you look into the money that's in here, this bill is approximately $750 million, but that's only because almost $2 million of it is not in the bill right now, because the bill is funded every 2 years except for the Outdoor Heritage Fund, which is funded every year. And if you add in the whole biennium, we're looking at a little over $900 million. We're almost $1 billion in this bill now. And I would be willing to bet that the majority of the people in this room have no idea what's in this bill. I'd be willing to bet that some of the conferees have no idea what's in this bill, especially seeing as how they didn't meet. That in itself is a tragedy. We've talked before about some of the non-government entities that get money in this bill, and we talked about the fact that some of them are on phase 11, phase 14, phase 17. Every single year they come back, buying more land, doing more projects, and funding their own organizations, and that's what they're doing. So is that what people voted for? When they passed this bill by a meager 56% of the people that voted for it, did they really pass a bill that said, hey, we want to fund some non-government entities? We want to make sure that we can put slush funds in here for our agencies. Minnesota Pollution Control Agency gets a lot. Bowser gets a lot. Metropolitan Council gets a lot. Department of Natural Resources gets the biggest share of this, because they not only get the outdoor heritage funds, but they also get the parks and trails funds. And they decide where it goes. In just a little bit, I'm going to touch on the arts, but I can't let this go on the amount of land that continues to be purchased. In the last biennium, in fact, I think even 2 years ago, 13,000 acres was purchased outright. Over half of that went after it was purchased by either the state, or nonprofits, it was turned back over to the federal government, or turned over to the federal government. And that land now, Minnesotans will never see any tax revenue from that land. And I still don't know in the tax bill right now, we'll see when that comes out, if the part that comes into the state is actually going to get the full funding on PILT. I seriously doubt it. In this bill, this year, 4,000 acres without PILT. The federal government is going to get 4,000 acres of Minnesota land in this bill. The state is going to take back from private people 2,500 acres. Now, if we can get the PILT, that'll be partial payment for my counties and your counties, which in some cases takes up about over 30%, 35% of their property tax revenue, which keeps their counties going and functioning. And we don't know if that's coming in, but the 4,000 acres we don't get. That's in the hands of somebody else now. We protect an easement in this bill over 11,000 acres. Now, you may think that that sounds good, that we can get the easements, still get some property tax off those easements, but here's the problem. Once those easements go on, they're a lifetime easement, and we've already got people coming in and telling us that they want a property tax reduction on this land because they can't use it anymore because they signed off on it. I have very little sympathy for those people because if they've signed their land away, then they should be able to pay those property taxes. But what is happening now, and is going to happen more in the future as the people that have done this grow older and can't sell land that's eased, this land too is going to go back to the state. Thousands upon thousands of acres in Minnesota, over a third, and I'll stand by that number, even though the Department of Natural Resources tries to fudge on it, between counties, federal government, and state, over a third of the land now is non-taxable. And for people that like taxes, I don't know why they would like that, because that money has to come from somewhere else now. Way, way better things we can spend the money on than land acquisition. With the nearly 33% of the property now out there that's no longer taxable, we could be using this money to enhance that land. We have a horrendous weed problem, invasive weed problem in Minnesota. You go out and our farmers actually sometimes get fined for not taking care of invasive weeds on their property, but if the state owns land right next to their property, now they're dealing with the seeds coming over from the state property onto their land, and the state does nothing to remedy the problem, but they'll fine the landowners or farmers if they don't. And then the only option they have is more chemicals, and they get fined for that too. So when people sit and talk about how great this is, I wish they would actually look into the bill, look into the projects, and see where the money is going. Now, I didn't bring my big book today because I didn't know if this bill was coming. But as a small example, on some of these projects, you can get a $5 million project, and the lion's share of some of those projects ends up going into the researchers to pay for the non-government entities. It continues to go into the coffers of the DNR, Pollution Control Agency, Bowser.
Senator Green, I want to remind you that we're on the final passes of the conference committee report, and usually these arguments are reserved for what comes back from conference committee, right? Because if we don't usually let people argue all over again the things they argue from the very beginning, right? So if you just be mindful of that, because I know you feel strongly about this, and I want to give you the space in order to do that, but I would hope that you would understand that this is the conference committee report, okay? Senator Green.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you for that reminder. I appreciate that. Well, there were some things that we did get in the bill that were taken out that really didn't make any sense to me why they were taken out. I have under the impression now that after hearing from Senator Pratt that maybe even our conferees were taking orders from up on higher folks, whether that, I won't even name names, but people who consider themselves above the other folks are coming in and telling us how to put these bills together. That in itself is a problem as well. So, Mr. President, once again, I can't support this bill. I guess with your gentle reminder there, I won't go into the arts issues here and the things that we've got going there within that portion of the bill and all the problems that need to be dealt with on that. I would hope in the future that that everybody would start reading this bill, and not just the bill, but look into the book that describes the projects. Because what you're getting in the bill, whether it's the money portion or the small description, doesn't even come close to telling you where this money's actually going. So with that, Mr. President, I guess I would also like to thank the folks that did work in the committee. And I'm just going to use first names because I'll screw up the last names. We had Victor, Casey, Cara. They did a fine job. Ben and Dan, the committee members. Even though I think that what we would have done in the bill would have been different had not other folks come in and decided they were going to put the bill together themselves, it doesn't change the fact that these guys worked very hard. And we appreciate that very much, more than I think they know, more than we sometimes say. And with that, Mr. President, I would ask folks before they go ahead and vote yes on this report, that they would take the time to even look through it. And if it passes this year, next year, get the book. They're not that hard to get. The outdoor heritage portion of that bill, they're happy to give you those books. And look and see what you're voting for. $1 billion. $1 billion on this bill. So with that, Mr. President, I'll be a no on the vote on the bill. Thank you.
Any other discussions? That of Senator Lang.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. I think it's a good time to have just a tiny little bit of a conversation as this conference committee report comes to our body. And a good thank you to Senator Herr for the work that he did in Legacy this year. But, you know, earlier when we had this bill come to the floor, there was several amendments that some were offered by Senator Green, some I voted for, some I didn't. But as the Lassard-Sams in particular proceeds through its paces, and I think you heard some frustration, and I'm not trying to put words in Senator Herr's mouth, but I think you did hear some frustration from him. Some members of the council have also expressed a little bit of frustration with the series of phase 14s, phase 17 as these projects come through, and the clarity kind of loses some of its clarity as they come through. So, and what I'd really like to say to the body is just over the course of time and over the course of the time frame when this legacy amendment comes due again, we need to start thinking about three things. And the three things I want everybody to think about is what the Constitution says: restore, enhance, and protect. And so far, we've done a very good job of restoring. We've done a very good job of enhancing. The one thing I'm a little iffy about is the fact that of the protection piece. And the protection piece is to protect that land perpetually. So how do we do that, Mr. President? And I think Senator Green had touched on that pretty reasonably in some of his amendments. And it's to say that PILT piece, the money that goes along with it, right? When that money leaves that property, when they don't pay those taxes to the local agencies, whether it's a county or a city or a municipality or whatever it is, when those money and those dollars start leaving, Lassard-Sam starts getting kind of a bad name by, there's counties out there right now that say no net gain. We don't want any more public land. They're 80% publicly, federally or state owned. So it's become kind of an issue. What I would say is that eventually, I think Lassard or any land purchases that happen within the state of Minnesota have to have a line item, have to have something in the budget that says, yes, we do commit to perpetually, owning this property, but we also perpetually will pay for it in the form of PILT or some other tax form. There are also other concerns that the council has addressed that I think the body probably should know about. One of them is perpetual easements. Easements on private property that do not have access by the public. Now, these are public funds that are going to private landowners for private easements perpetually that we always expect them to pay PILT. So as it goes forward and now these landowners have property that the state has paid for, and the public still doesn't have public access. Now, again, these are public dollars going into a public conservation easement on private property. So it ends up being the public dollars of all the citizens of the state of Minnesota, but then again, we don't have access to it. So that's just a couple of thoughts as we go through the council. I'm going to be voting green on the bill today. I put a lot of work into this, as well as Senator Herr. I just would like the body to know that there are some things that we have to start thinking about as the time frame goes on before we, and I know it's a detailed process that we go through and we get a big book at the beginning of the year, but I just want everybody to know that as time goes on, we need to start looking at these items. We need to start thinking about them in a long-term point of view instead of just every year as we go through this almost $1 billion of spending, just making sure that it's perpetually funded in a way that is sustainable. So thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, first off, I want to thank Senator Herr for appointing me to the conference committee. I've never served on the Legacy Conference Committee in the past, and it was a very interesting and educational process. Members, these are funds that these are not general funds. These don't add to our deficit. These enhance our lives, and we get these through the lottery, and they're voluntary taxes, so to speak. And we're doing a lot of good work. Of course, there are concerns, as Senator Green and Senator Lang brought up, but there are some things that we have an opportunity to do with these funds to not add to the deficit. And one of them was one that passed with bipartisan support here, and that was the 50th anniversary of the end of the Vietnam War. Another one that was in the original Senate bill was the 250th anniversary for the Declaration of Independence. And I saw some of the offer sheets going back and forth on a second-hand basis. And Senator Herr, I appreciate that you fought hard for a couple of those items, well, actually you fought hard for all the Senate provisions, and I thought you did a good job. The House decided that they weren't going to take name grants, that we had to do these competitive grants. And Mr. President, my concern with that is that we have now created these priorities. And I'm trying to figure out how the Historical Society and how the Humanities Center are going to deal with these priorities. So if we look at page 60, Mr. President, it instructs that the Historical Society must give priority to the City of St. Paul to design a statue for Tu Zhang. Pardon my, for some of these I'm going to mispronounce them, and I apologize. For the City of Marshall to replace the historic band shell at Liberty Park, the George Stoppel Farmstead, the Serbian home in South St. Paul, the Forest Lake Veterans Memorial, the Fairmont Opera House, the Litchfield Opera House. Mr. President, if we go to the Humanities Center must give priority consideration for grants to arts from the inside, arts to the Moorhead and Maplewood Cultural Malls, the Asian Economic Development Association, Capri Theater, the Minnesota State Band, Fight for Your Dreams, HERFA International for Oromo Youth, the Hmong Cultural Center, Mid-Nemo, the Minnesota Zhejiang People in Action, the Phyllis Wheatley Community Center, on and on and on. The problem is, Mr. President, we don't know what it means to be a priority project. I never got a chance to ask that question when we were sitting in conference committee, because the only time we called a conference committee was when the conference committee report was done and they asked me to sign off on it. I brought an amendment to the conference committee saying, let's define what a priority project is. And let's not name any priority projects. Let's just say that anything that had been heard in one body or the other had some sort of vetting, and they are classified as a priority project because they've been heard in public and they've had public discussion. The concern, Mr. President, is that we are doing direct appropriations through the word priority, that these organizations are going to feel an obligation to fund these projects despite the other applications that come in. Something that we fought against here in the Minnesota Senate when we created the original competitive grant language. I was hoping it would get better in conference committee, and it didn't. And I wasn't trying to defund any one of these projects. For every one of us in our district, these projects are important. The Serbian House in South St. Paul. My grandparents were Serbian. I've never been there. I'm gonna make a special point to go. But Mr. President, we never met. We never talked about how we were going to resolve these issues. It was all done. Before our 3 o'clock conference committee meeting, I was asked to sign off on it just before we ever met. There was no transparency in this process. And I'm not blaming Senator Hur. I think it was a combination, whether it was our leadership team or whether it was the House that was driving this process. I don't know. But we've had a number of conference committees. Mr. President, you've been chairing one that has had open discussions. We never had one. We had a completed bill. And I was told by one of the co-chairs on the committee that we couldn't take any amendments because this thing was wrapped up. That's not legislating, Mr. President. And it's for that reason and that reason only that I refused to sign the conference committee report. Because, Mr. President, we have a process here to be transparent. We have a process here that allows the people of Minnesota to see how we do our work. As ugly and as boring as it might be sometimes, the people of Minnesota deserve the right to see how we do our work. Again, Mr. President, I'm not disparaging any of these projects. I've got a project that didn't make the priority list. I wish it would have. But that's not the point. The point of the matter is, how will this language be interpreted when it goes? And we lost the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, and we lost the ability, or we lost the funding for the 50th anniversary of the Vietnam War. Mr. President, we have 97,000 Vietnam veterans living in the state of Minnesota. We have American and we have Southeast Asian veterans. We have SGU veterans that are living in the state of Minnesota. And when they came home, we didn't treat them very well. And when those Southeast Asian veterans came over, they weren't welcomed with open arms. We've spent 50 years trying to figure out how to work together as one Minnesota. I will say, though, Mr. President, that being a young kid during the Vietnam War and seeing how soldiers were treated to how we treat our veterans today is much, much different. I think we realized the mistakes we made back in the 1970s. And those veterans deserve the long thank you and recognition that they never got back in 1975 when they came home. Now, we can apply for grants but we're not a priority grant. We're not a priority project. And that's what concerns me, Mr. President. The 250th anniversary for the Declaration of Independence is not listed as a priority in any of these items. And how are they supposed to compete fairly with those that are listed, with those that are presumed to be an obligation for the Historical Society and the Humanities Center to fund? And how fair is that competitive process? Those are the concerns I have, Mr. President. Those are the concerns I wanted to bring to the conference committee and didn't get a chance to. So I thank Senator Hur for his work on this. I thank him for putting me on the conference committee. I still learned a lot. But Mr. President, I think there are still a number of concerns with this bill. And I think members need to look long and hard. This isn't a fiscal issue. This won't add to the deficit, as I mentioned before. But this goes to the very heart of who we are as Minnesotans. This goes to the very heart of who we are as a legislature and how we do our work and how we present ourselves to the people that send us here. Thank you, Mr. President.
Before we go to Senator Hur, there's one speaker before Senator Hur, just so we're all clear. That would be that of Senator Abler, and then we will go to Senator Hur for final comments before we vote for final passage on this conference committee report. Senator Abler.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. And actually, there's no dishonor in being a representative, and you and I enjoyed that. But then you accede to the higher title, and I'm grateful about that. I'm going to ask Senator Hur to yield in a minute. I'm just trying to figure out this bill. There's a whole listing of events and festivals that this bill calls for, and I did vote for the bill on the way out. And I'm just wondering if it's changed quite a bit. Senator Hur, on line 68.24, there's $1.5 million for a bunch of events. And so the question I have is, what do you think all those events are going to cost if they all were approved?
Senator Hur, briefly to the question, 68.24.
Senator Abler, thank you for the question. The language here actually talk about the project that had, for all the project that had $200,000 cap on.
Senator Abler.
Thank you, Mr. President. Maybe Senator Hur, maybe I wasn't clear. So just to help you with the bill, on page 68 and 69, on 68.24, there's $1.5 million for community-based organizations and local governments to support a variety of cultural festivals and events. There's a list on the second page there, on page 69, the Somali Museum Annual Festival, the Twin Cities Jazz Fest, Selby Avenue's Jazz Fest. I won't read them all. There's like 10 of them, including the Taste of Minnesota. And I'm curious if you have an idea what, if they all got the money, what that would probably cost.
Senator Hurst, to the question.
Thank you, Senator Abler. There's a cap in there, and then based on their proposal, and the agency will determine the cost of it. But we put a cap here at $200,000. So then there's still some money after this amount. All tally up, there's still some amount of money left for competitive grant for those agencies that's not named here.
Senator Abler.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. Maybe be more specific. I'm not trying to be clever, although I was a representative and a senator, Mr. President. But so, for instance, the Taste of Minnesota left this body with $1.8 million. And so the whole pot of money is 1.5. And so it seems like the will of the body here was to get them enough money to actually have a festival. And at one point there was discussions of $1.3 million, and then it got moved around. And so, Mr. President, I think putting all these festivals here is actually going to make sure that some do not happen with the money that's available. And that's troubling to me. If the Senator Hur would yield for one more question, Mr. President.
Senator Hur, will you yield for another question? He will. Senator Abler.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And so just finally, on the Taste of Minnesota, with a $200,000 cap and a Senate position of 1.8, Have you spoken to the Taste of Minnesota people and decided that that's an adequate amount for them to do this amazing festival and unite Minnesotans and have an amazing day of safe and family fun?
Senator Hurd, to the question.
Thank you, Senator Abler. You know, originally the amount was $1.8 million here as it left the floor. I made a number of attempts trying to put direct appropriation that I felt will be adequate to get the Taste of Minnesota operable. You know, a number of negotiation point from 1 million to 700, but we had two body here, and I can't sit on both sides of the body, so it was the House denied the direct appropriation, so it become a priority list.
Senator Abler.
Mr. President, I'm not trying to belabor it, but this is shocking to me, and as a person who thinks this is like, frankly, one of the, well, this bill is full of amazing things, but this is the coolest thing in the bill. Mr. President, do you mind if I ask Senator Hoffman to yield for a question?
Senator Abler, for that brief, brief
Okay, yeah,
request.
I'll ask him a brief question.
Senator Hoffman, will you yield?
Mr. President, I shall yield.
Anyway, it's just, I'm going to sit down and let him, I don't think I'll reply to my request, but this is, anyway, so Senator Hoffman, what is this going to do to the Taste of Minnesota? Thank you.
Senator Hoffman, to the question.
Thank you, Mr. President, and to the good Senator from Panoka, thank you for that question. Let me go back. A few years ago, when the city of Minneapolis needed to do something to revitalize its downtown image and about getting people out on the street back in downtown to do something, Senator Carrie Dietzig, does anybody in this body remember her name? Senator President, I'm just bringing that up so I get people's attention. Wanted to revitalize the imagery of downtown Minneapolis and said we need to do this. And guess what? Senator Abler and I were the first authors on that, to be also with Senator Dibble, who the other Minneapolis Senator, Bobby Joe Champion, Senator Dietzig. And when I asked about being just a co-author, Senator Dietzig said, no, we want you to be the chief author. Matter of fact, Senator Dibble said the same thing. Something about music, Mr. President. Do you know anything about music? I think you should, and you do. Matter of fact, last year, we were able to feature the Minneapolis Music Sound, and there were some wonderful musicians that came back to Minnesota. And you know what, Mr. President? Guess how many incidents were downtown Minneapolis? Guess how many police incidents you had in downtown Minneapolis with 150,000 people downtown Minneapolis? 0, Mr. President, 0. And amazing stuff. Senator Hurd said, absolutely 1.86 million. And then, will you go down to 1.3 million? Yes, to the Taste of Minnesota folks, who, by the way, if you look at their records, nobody takes a payment as far as like you're on the payroll, right? This is all going toward the activities. And it's amazing what it's done for downtown Minneapolis. Why should I care? But you know what? The downtown region really cares. It's a business revitalization on there. But the main thing, it's the most diverse cultural event in the state of Minnesota. Just got to walk around and look what's going on there, right, Mr. President? So, Senator Hurd says, yep, 1.86. Nope, how about 1.3? Yep. Then I hear that, oh, he's over there negotiating for $700,000. The Taste of Minnesota, it cost about $4 million to put it on. For them to be able to do it with Minnesota, state of Minnesota's help, they said, yes, we could do it for $1.3 million. $200,000 means they're going to have to cancel downtown, Mr. President. That's a shame. And if anybody cares about the revitalization of downtown Minneapolis for the region, they would vote no against this bill. I'm going to vote no against this bill, Mr. President, and I would hope the good senator from the east side of St. Paul would have done a better job of sharing with people that really needed to know about the good things in the state of Minnesota.
All right, before we go to Senator Hurd, members, can I just remind you of something? That I know that we get passionate, and when we speak a little louder in the mics, it's rough on the ears of senators. So if you could just be thoughtful and considerate of that, that would be very, very helpful. All right, with that being said, the last voice that we'll hear before we vote will be that of Senator Hurd. Senator Hurd, you get the final comments before we vote.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. It's been a long haul, and I'm proud this bill actually is, from my point of view, is better than it left here. You know, although number of provision did not make it, I fought hard for the Senate stand. If you check Senate research, you know, it will go back and forth. I trying to put as much as I can, and I know that transparency, you know, is something that I value highly. The bill itself is a House file. In order for us to call, for us to call the conference committee, it has to initiate by the House. And even though it was a meeting of today, maybe the first time, I have been sitting in the legacy in the past where conference committee decide before time and we have just 1 hour or 2, and sometimes it goes several days, mainly for legacy. But regardless, I have kept members in my conference committee, including Senator Pratt, abreast of the situation that happening, transpire over the course, and so that I can prove it to my members that I have defended their project, I defended their initiative for the bill. So I try the best I can, and only God will know whether you vote yes or no. That's up to your belief. And I believe that the bill had come out better than I thought. I'm disappointed as well that it didn't come on truthfully based on personal needs. But this bill itself, let me remind it that it has 4 articles. It has clean water fund. It has outdoor heritage fund. It has park control funds, along with cultural heritage. And if you pick one amendment, one provision alone to vote no for the bill, that's up to you. But I will encourage members to vote yes. And I thank Senator Lane for explaining further about the outdoor heritage. We're in good company together in outdoor heritage, and we will continue to improve the outdoor heritage sector as this bill transform later on or when it's up for renewal. So thank you very much. I'm not going to repeat much because Senator Pratt already lists all the projects that I was going to mention, all the projects that he is in this bill, so I don't need to be redundant, but thank you for doing that. And this is a good bill, not the best bill to personal need, but a good bill for Minnesota today. So I ask for your support to vote yes.
The Secretary will take the roll for final passage of the Conference Committee report. Senator Bolden, for those voting pursuant to Rule 40.7.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Mann votes aye.
Senator Mann votes aye.
Senator Frentz votes aye.
Senator Frentz votes aye.
Senator Hochschild votes aye.
Senator Hochschild votes aye.
Senator Fate votes aye.
Senator Fate votes aye.
Senator Marty votes aye.
Senator Marty votes aye.
Senator Port votes aye.
Senator Port votes aye.
Senator Putnam votes aye.
Senator Putnam votes aye.
Senator Murphy votes aye.
Senator Murphy votes aye.
Senator McEwen votes aye.
Senator McEwen votes aye.
And Senator Wickland votes aye.
And Senator Wickland votes aye. Senator Jasinski, in pursuant to Rule 40.7.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Duckworth votes no.
Senator Duckworth votes no.
Senator Crewen votes no.
Senator Crewen votes no.
I'm still waiting. Mr. President.
Senator Jasinski.
Senator Gruenhagen votes no.
Senator Gruenhagen votes no. All senators having voted, who did?
Mr. President.
Senator Jasinski.
Senator Coleman votes aye.
Senator Coleman votes aye.
Senator Halsey votes aye.
Senator Housley votes aye. All senators having voted, who desires a vote? The secretary will close the roll. There being 37 ayes and 30 noes, the bill is passed and its title agreed to. And just for specificity, the bill is passed and its title agreed to as amended by the conference committee. We will now proceed to the 13th order of business, which is announcements of Senate interests. Any announcements of Senate interest? Senator Kunish.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would just like to let you all know that tomorrow is the 4th annual American Indian Day on the Hill. We will have all kinds of things happening. I'd like to invite you, most importantly, to the morning invocation at 9:30 in the morning. We will have invocation by President Robert Larson from the Lower Sioux Indian community. There will be a welcome song and honoring of Jerry Dearly, and that will be out on the, I believe, on the front of the Capitol. And then there will be some speakers in the rotunda to address the importance of the collaboration and the relationship we have between our state government and our tribal nations. And so I would like to invite you all to join us tomorrow morning for that. I think it would be a great way to start your day. And so Wopi Latanka.
Any other announcements of Senate interest? Members, any other announcements of Senate interest? Seeing none. Senator Bowden for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that the Senate do now adjourn until Monday, May 19th at 11 a.m.
On that motion, all in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The motion prevails and the Senate is now adjourned.